Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today in one of my favorite topics, which is food paradigms. So I'm going to explain in more detail later on what paradigms actually are and what they have to do with the way we eat and with our nutrition. But let me just say, this seminar is really about treating ourselves the right way and learning how to do that. So there's going to be a lot of misconceptions that we're going to get rid of and we're going to leave behind to really be able to nourish our bodies and our soul equally with good, healthy food. So what we're going to get into is my personal background and why I'm so passionate about this topic of food paradigms and treating ourselves with them. I'm going to talk about a few simple food facts so that you have the basic understanding of what our macronutrients are, our micronutrients, and our calories. We're going to talk about the biochemistry of food. Don't worry if that sounds very fancy right now, a topic. I'm going to break it down. It's actually very, very logical and makes a lot of sense once you dive a little bit into that subject. And then we're going to talk about the food paradigms, of course, and how we treat ourselves in a good, beneficial way. And then we're going to just summarize it all and talk about what's the best way for you to start if you're interested into developing that habit of treating yourself the right way. So a little bit about myself. My name is Tash Enriquez. I'm the founder and director of Created Coaching. I have a background in sports and exercise science and medicine. And I've been a personal trainer for many, many years before I also became a life coach. That was about 6 years ago. So I've been practicing life coaching together with personal training for quite some time. And then I reached that point where I realized that we're always just treating, or we're always just working on a part of the bigger picture. So we're either taking care of our physical health or we're taking care of our mental health. And these two really can't go separate. They have to go together. So that's where Created Coaching, the idea for Created Coaching initially stemmed from, that I really wanted to combine the physical and the mental health, and that I really wanted to be able to deliver the benefits of both to my clients. So let's dive right into it. Food facts. So just a few basics: macronutrients, micronutrients, or macros and micros for short, and then kilocalories. So they're actually called kilocalories. The reason being is that we measure the energy that comes out of 1 calorie when we take them in. But let's start with the macronutrients. So macronutrients are essential nutrients that our body needs for energy and to maintain the body's structure and the body's shape as well. So that's really important to keep in mind, that all 3 macronutrients are essential. And the 3 macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So keeping in mind that they're essential, we can already start questioning some of the more extreme diets that are populated out there. So when we're talking about a no-carb diet, for example, there's a huge difference between a low-carb diet and a no-carb diet, but there is no-carb diets out there as well. And really, the idea of the low-carb diets is much more that we want to increase the protein, and therefore the carbohydrates become a little bit less. So if we have a certain amount of calories that we want to take in a set day, let's say 2,000 calories, and we want to distribute these calories between the macronutrients, between the carbohydrates, the protein, and the fat. If we try to raise our protein, something else has to become a little bit less. Now, normally our Western diets are very rich in carbohydrates and sugar, as well as in fat. So that's also the easiest available. If you think about, you haven't prepared your meals, you are hungry, you're going into any convenience store and you're trying to grab something quick to eat, it will be quite heavy in carbohydrates normally, and sugar, and potentially also in fat if you're going for fast food chains. What's important to know is that protein and carbohydrates each have about 4 calories per gram, but fat has about 9 calories per gram. So that's why even the healthy fats, we just want to be a little bit mindful of the quantity that we're taking in, because otherwise we're just going above our calorie allowance very easily. So protein, carbohydrates, and fat are our three macronutrients, which are all essential to fulfill important functions within the body. Micronutrients. So micronutrients are a little bit more, let me rephrase it. Micronutrients are a little bit more used to change the way we feel. They're our well-being ingredients. So they are not essential. However, if we lack micronutrients, we will still develop some sort of diseases, or we will definitely feel the symptoms of the lack of micronutrients over time. So there are water-soluble vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins, macro minerals, and trace minerals. So to give you an example of a macro mineral is magnesium, for example. We know that we need magnesium, so there's a bigger quantity that we should take in. And then we have trace minerals that we just need in much lesser quantities. But also the vitamins are in there. So also important here to note is we have water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. For example, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. What that means is if there is no fat coming in, then your body can't absorb the vitamin properly. So mentioning vitamin D, because here in this region, we tend to have quite a big part of the population that struggles with vitamin D deficiency. So keeping in mind that you should take your vitamin D together with food that contains fat. Then depending on what you do and your lifestyle, you will have different requirements for your micronutrients. So as I said, they're not essential, but we still need them. We still require them. So if you're very active, if you're doing a lot of sports, a lot of exercise, you will require a larger amount of micronutrients, of certain micronutrients. And then we have our calories. So some of you might be in the habit of reading the nutrition labels that you find on your products that you buy in the grocery store. And that's really a good exercise to do. Just getting into the habit of reading the calories, but now you also have an understanding of the macronutrients. So I would also look into the carbohydrates, the fat, and the protein. And if you're working with a normal, well-balanced diet, we want to have about a 40% carbohydrate split, and then 30% for fat and 30% for protein. So that's a good place to start. However, you now know that in terms of calories, 9 calories per 1 gram of fat. Yeah, remember that. So when we're saying a 30-30 split between protein and fat, you will actually take in much less grams of fat than you would with the protein. Okay, so keeping that in mind. Now, on most food items, you will see calories with percentages based on an average 2,000 calorie diet. This 2,000 calorie diet is a male person of average height, around 70 kg of weight. So that's not a lot, right? So if you're female or if you're a heavier male, your calorie consumption should change depending on that, on your body composition as well. So a calorie is a unit of measurement, and it's the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. That's the explanation why we call it kilocalories as well. And calories are really, really they're just our driving force. They're really the energy that we need to move our body around. So if I sit, I have a certain amount of calories or a certain amount of energy that I now require. If I even just raise my arm up, that already extends my calorie expenditure slightly. So the more we move, the more calories we need. And what we want to try and achieve is a fine balance between the calories that we take in, the energy that we take in, and the energy that we expel. So the more we move, the higher our calorie intake could be if we want to maintain our weight. By the way, at any point, feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So now we're coming to the biochemistry of food. So we have the micronutrients that are our little well-being nutrients in the body, but we also have a lot of hormones and we have neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters help the body to break down or to get the hormones where they are needed the most. So they're transmitting through the nervous system, the neurological system. That's why they're called neurotransmitters. So these neurotransmitters are very, very important to maintain and stabilize normal hormonal functions, and with that also our mood and our well-being. So whenever there is, for example, depression or anxiety, we know that there is an imbalance in the hormonal system. Now, it can be that the imbalance came first, and resulting from that, we then develop anxiety or depression. A good example for that is a thyroid disorder. So whenever there's a thyroid disorder, the thyroid is very important for hormonal regulation. So when there's any disturbance in the thyroid, then that will affect our psychological system as well, meaning there is a high chance of depression, there's a high chance of anxiety. So we had that imbalance in the neurological system, in the hormonal system first, and then we're having the symptoms of anxiety and depression. However, it goes the other way around. So if we have depression due to any kind of traumatic event, for example, it will over time then also affect our hormonal system, and we're experiencing the same hormonal imbalance. Which is why the modern antidepressant medication, for example, affects the amount of serotonin that we have in our bloodstream. So serotonin here is a mood stabilizer. It's responsible for our well-being, for our happiness, for our ability to experience happiness. Now, we have dopamine as well, responsible for experiencing pleasure, motivational role in the reward system. So dopamine is one that we get a lot from exercising, but also from achieving our dreams, achieving our goals, achieving work, events, getting praise from people that we want to get praise from. Oxytocin is responsible for bonding, for love, and for trust. And then we have endorphins, which is also called the runner's high hormone. And so we get endorphin normally after longer periods of cardiovascular training, when we get our heart rate up nice and high and the whole system is running a little bit at a higher level. And that's where we get that release of endorphins into the system. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this all here is because we can actually affect these great happy chemicals, these feel-good hormones through our food as well. And they are closely linked to our gut health. So the more we take care of our large and small intestines through healthy, nutritious food, making sure that we get in not just the right quality and quantity of macronutrients, but also the micronutrients, the more we feel relaxed in our body and in our mind equally. So we're really able to affect the way we feel through our food. So let's get into the paradigms. So our paradigms are thoughts or belief systems that we have developed over a long period of time. And this is a concept that's really, really important to understand at this point. So anything that you're being taught from the day you were born, if it's being repeated over and over again, it will go into your subconscious mind. And that's a very important process that your body goes through, that your brain goes through, because otherwise you would have to use up a lot of your brain capacity with thinking about everyday tasks. So for example, if I'm asking you now, how did it feel like to brush your teeth this morning? You probably don't remember. If I'm asking you, what temperature exactly did the water in your shower have? You probably don't know. So we're learning to automate a lot of our everyday tasks. We're learning to automate a lot of movements. So if I'm grabbing my water bottle, if I'm having a sip of water, I don't need to think about how I'm doing that. I don't actively signal to my hand to grab the bottle, to lift it up, to take it to my mouth. I don't signal to my digestive system how to actually take in the water and what to do with this. All of it, it's automated. So that's a great, great, great function that the body has, that we can automate tasks, that we can automate movements. However, we also automate what we believe and how we react to situations and the thoughts that we have about certain things, such as food, for example. So I want you to take a moment and think about the different beliefs that you've been given, maybe from your parents or from other influential persons in your life, or from situations, the situation that you were brought up in. So your beliefs, your paradigms around food. Good. So you might have positive associations or you might have negative associations with food. In my case, food, so I'm going to share a personal example just so that you find it easier to understand maybe what these paradigms can do. So in my case, one big paradigm that I have around food is pressure. I used to not eat a lot as a child. I just didn't like to eat a lot. I was enjoying food, but I didn't like to feel that pressure. And whenever I was at my grandmother's house, which I was quite often after school, she would cook a 3-course meal. She did that every single day. It would be soup, it would be a main course, and it would be dessert. And I had to finish it all. Now, fortunately, she actually left me alone to eat quite often, and I was very young at this time. And so I ended up very often throwing the food away because I would literally get myself to a point where I was just sick over the quantity of food. And it's not because I had an eating disorder or anything that I would be close to the point of throwing up. It was just because it was physically too much food for me. So I'm still quite pressured by finding myself in situations where I know I'll be asked to eat a lot of quantities, more than I would like to eat. So, for example, here in the UAE, I cannot go to brunches. I'm getting a little bit anxious by the idea that there's so much food around. So that's a strong paradigm that I have. Paradigms can be super positive around food. They can be associated with a lot of happy gatherings, family gatherings. There's always a lot of food around when we have a celebration, be it any kind of religious celebrations, be it just any kind of family gatherings, birthdays, weddings, anything. Yes, anything is related to food. And in many cultures, making sure that there is enough food is very, very important. It's an important part of our cultures and of our upbringing. Now, where this paradigm or where paradigm in general become a little bit tricky is when we actually don't question our paradigms. So this is what today's seminar is all about, is becoming aware of our paradigms and really questioning them and making a conscious decision to say, okay, I want to keep this belief, or I want to change it slightly and adapt it, or I want to just put it aside. Because, so whenever we act from our subconscious mind, again, we don't have control. So I'm giving you another example about something not food related. You for sure have situations where someone says something to you and immediately you're being triggered by whatever the person said. Yeah, so that's something that is in your subconscious, or it triggers something that's in your subconscious mind, and you immediately respond to it. You might, get very angry. You might get very upset. You might, just not be able to think clearly anymore because it has triggered one of your beliefs, one of your paradigms. So with that being said, if we are able to actually just step back for a moment and consider that situation and think like, is that really that bad what this person said? Did he actually mean it in that way, or did she mean it in that way? Or is it just coming from a place of a different understanding, a different belief? Then we can have a more logical approach to that situation and make a conscious choice if we want to get upset or not. But if we only respond from a place of our subconscious mind, we can't do that. So this is why we need to be able to understand our own paradigms. So with food, as I already said, we have a lot of occasions where food is very, very important. And of course, food is important because it's essential. So we have to learn how to eat in a mindful and healthy manner. And I'm sure all of you have heard treat yourself, or give your child a treat, or treat yourself with a piece of cake, or, so we're using the word treat and we're using food very often together. So food is considered a treat, right? But now I want you to think about what kind of food are being considered a treat in general. So let's think about in our society, what is considered a treat? And we'll probably end up with sweets, with chocolate, maybe with pizza. We'll end up with, I don't know, lollipop. Did I say cake? Right? Good. Now I want you to think about your own understanding of a treat with food. So maybe your understanding of what you're treating yourself with food is slightly different. So what is a treat to you, the food treat? Good. And now I want you to think about, what are you treating? So whenever you think about treating yourself, what is it that you actually like to treat? Oh, with meat. Okay, I'm seeing meat here. Actually, I'm doing the same thing. I'll speak about it in a moment. So which situation makes you want to have a treat? And obviously there can be many situations, but in general, which situation makes you want to have a treat? Okay, so I'm going to share my treat situation again, just so that we have an example to work with. So I end up treating myself when I am tired and I don't have time and I'm exhausted and I need something to eat. So that's my treat situation. And then I do treat myself with junk food normally, and it's pizza for me. So that's normally what happens. Meat is a different type of treat for me. So I'm going to continue with my example. So I'm exhausted, I'm tired, and now I'm having junk food. So what am I treating? So am I treating an emotional deficit or am I treating a physical deficit? Well, in my case, it's a mix of both. So emotionally, I'm too exhausted to actually do anything. And it normally happens at the end of a long day when I haven't eaten properly the whole day, because I didn't have time and I would just be running around. And so I'm physically and mentally tired at this point. And I definitely have a physical deficit in these situations because, again, I haven't eaten the whole day and I'm tired and I'm exhausted. So my treat of, instead of preparing healthy, nutritious food, rather taking out, and let's say I've had a pizza in that day, does it actually satisfy my emotional deficit? And I would say it does to some extent, satisfy my emotional deficit because it allows me to just relax and, now eat food. However, I was tired, so I'm still mentally tired. So there would be other ways, and I come to that, how I could or should treat my emotional deficit. Is it treating my physical deficit? Well, so in terms of calories, it would be. However, if we're now going back to the macronutrients and the micronutrients, it definitely doesn't, because I'm now eating something that is actually unhealthy. I'm eating something that doesn't help to bring up or to raise my energy levels back up, my physical energy levels back up, other than from a caloric point of view, but it will not actually provide nutrition to my body. So did my treat actually treat? I would say no. All right. So my treat was actually harming, because what would happen in my example, and again, that's a real life example and it happens, is that, I would overeat, I would feel even more tired and exhausted. I would feel physically bad about the food that's now blocking up my system, and I would go to sleep and probably not even sleep as well as I could or should have. So I'm going to go through another example. And if you have any questions around yours, again, please feel free to drop them into the chat box. But I'm going to go through another example, and that's an example that I hear very often from clients that I work with. And that example involves cake or chocolate, something sweet, and it involves feeling lonely. So, so the sensation that we have is, I feel lonely, I feel disappointed in other people maybe, or in a situation, and then I'm treating myself with something sweet, with a chocolate cake. So what am I treating? Am I treating an emotional deficit, or am I treating a physical deficit? Well, most probably an emotional deficit. If I have an emotional deficit, so already we need to be honest with ourselves and consider that we're treating an emotional deficit with a physiological solution, which is the chocolate cake. So that already, doesn't quite match. Am I getting a benefit from a chocolate cake? Well, chocolate actually increases your serotonin levels slightly for a short period of time. So this is why a lot of people get quite attracted and addicted to sweet treats whenever there is, for example, a sensation like loneliness. So there will be a very short treat in a positive way. However, again, we've treated a psychological problem with a physiological treat, and it's not really quite working out. So what could we do if we actually understand that the sensation that we have is being lonely? We could actually look into reaching out to other people, really questioning, okay, what can I do to make myself feel better? How can I treat that actual problem that I'm having, rather than now looking into a food treat? And I'm seeing the questions, I'm going to answer them at the end of the session. So being very conscious about how we treat, what we treat, and when we treat is just super, super important to make sure that we don't fall into a trap of never really looking into our paradigms. And now again, I'm coming from a point of view where, actually treating yourself with food is a paradigm for many of us. It might not be for you, but for many of us, that is a paradigm. And I think it's important to also consider how we speak to our children about food in that regard. Today we're having a treat. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And please don't misunderstand that I'm not against having foods and certain meals that are being used as something special, as a celebration. I'm just encouraging, your thoughts around the idea of what does it mean to treat yourself with food? Because if we get to a point where we want to treat ourselves with healthy food, with nutritious food, with food that provides a lot of energy, with food that makes us feel good because it contains the feel-good hormones and encourages the neurotransmitters to work a little bit better, with food that provides us with all the micronutrients that we might require, but as well has a good distribution of macronutrients. Well, that would be a treat, wouldn't it? In that case, we really get to sustain a well, healthy physiological state. And again, that's going to reflect on our mindset as well. So that's how a treat becomes something very, very positive. But we always want to keep in mind that if we're eating some fast food, we might not actually treat ourselves. Yeah, we might harm ourselves. And again, I'm not at all against having that exceptional kind of food. But especially when you're working with children or when you have children, when you want to develop a nice, healthy understanding of food with your children, I think it's important to consider that, what are we saying to our children? Is it a treat or is it an exception? Why is it an exception? There's nothing wrong with telling children why we shouldn't have cake every single day, because, it contains sugar and we can tell them that it contains sugar. Okay, so where to start? How would you start developing a nice, healthy diet that really treats your body and your mind the right way? Well, I would start with the first question: what is important to you? Why am I putting that in there? Because you can have many different goals that you want to achieve with your nutrition, and you're allowed to have goals within that healthy treating paradigm, this new paradigm that you might choose to take on. So what could be important to you? For example, you might want to get lots of energy. So you might be at a point in your life where you're constantly tired, you're feeling you're having lack of energy, and that's the most important to you. That's what you want to get out of your nutrition. And if that would be the case, then you would pay extra attention to the micronutrients. So you would really make sure that you're favoring the fresh, healthy produce that is very, very rich in color, that is very healthy. You would probably try and maybe not overcook your vegetables to make sure that you get that extra amount of nutrients. You would maybe look up a little bit into food supplements as well and see how you can even opt up a little bit more on these micronutrients and make sure that you have that all fulfilled and covered. Or the most important aspect for you might be your physical appearance. So you might want to make sure that you are actually slimming down a little bit without going on a crazy diet, that you're finding a way to sustainably eat where you don't have to worry about gaining weight or losing weight all the time, and your body is just happy and healthy where it's at, and possibly also allows you to exercise. So if that's important to you, then you would pay extra attention to your macronutrients. So making sure that the distribution between your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fat is really beneficial to your lifestyle and to the way you want to look. And you can go into different directions there. So for some people, it's important to just have a slim appearance without getting too athletic. For other people, it's more important to have that athletic build, and they would probably exercise a lot. So then we would play slightly with the right amount of macronutrients as well. But again, if your physical appearance is your main goal, or your sporting career is your main goal, then you would pay more attention to the macronutrients. Whereas if you want to get the energy, then you would pay more attention to the micronutrients. And of course, you can absolutely take care of both as well. Other things that can be important to you, well, of course, you might have any kind of specific health requirements. And I listed that a little bit lower as well. What are your health requirements? So of course, if you have any specific dietary needs, then that is important to you, right? So that's going to be the main reason for the way you are eating and the main reasoning for your diets. Then we have a lot of ethical considerations. So you might choose to just go with local produce. That's an ethical consideration. You might choose to eat vegetarian or pescatarian or vegan. Again, that's an ethical consideration. They can sometimes mix as well. So when we talk about what's important to you and ethical considerations, they might be interlinked. So for example, if your energy is your most important driver for the way you eat, that might definitely influence into your ethical considerations as well. Why? Because if you then choose to eat mostly organic and fresh and local produce, chances are your produce hasn't been depleted of micronutrients just as much. With that being said, I also have to say that nowadays it is very hard to accurately know how many nutrients are in your produce, just because even if you go organic and local and, you know, as clean as you can, we just don't know really the quality of the ground, of the soil anymore. So I have to say, personally, when I work with clients, I do recommend food supplements as well, especially if we're talking about the energy aspect of the food and the energy that you're getting from your food, because it's just so hard to, you know, guesstimate really how much we're taking in from our produce, unfortunately. And then we're still cooking some produce. And yeah, so, but ethical considerations can also include, you know, the way the food is produced, and sometimes going organic might not be the ethical choice because it means that you're actually purchasing produce that has been produced very, very far away and then has to be brought here. And yeah, so there's a lot of different little elements that go into ethical considerations, and you may or may not have an understanding of that already. It might be important to you, it might not be important to you. And by all means, that's completely your choice where you want to go with these. But I just put it in there because I thought it's something interesting to even think about. Health requirements, I already mentioned that. There's a lot of great diets out there that have a bit of a bad reputation, that are very beneficial for certain health conditions. So for example, keto diet, actually, the origin of the keto diet is because it's been found very beneficial for Parkinson. And I think the original studies, if I'm not mistaken, were with children with epileptic seizures. So that's where the whole keto diet came from. So keto diet, as you might know, is very, very, very low in carbohydrates, so almost zero carbohydrates. And it's something that I absolutely not recommend if you don't have any specific dietary needs. I know it's been a bit of a diet fade, especially the last 2 years. Fortunately, we're slowly coming off it a little bit, I feel, but definitely 2 years ago, I was asked by all of my clients if they should be doing keto. And my answer was, why would you want to do keto? And they were like, oh, because my friend did it and they lost so much weight on it. And I was like, okay. So keto is a very tricky diet. However, again, it has huge health benefits for certain conditions. That doesn't mean that it has a lot of health benefits for the general population. Of course, if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, we would also go very, very low on carbohydrates. We would go low on carbohydrates, and we would try to maintain to have a good carbohydrate balance throughout the day, to maintain your blood sugar levels rather than having sudden spikes in the blood sugar levels. Other health requirements could be high cholesterol, where we would take specific care of the fat levels. So that's obviously all different requirements. And if you're falling into that category, then hopefully you're having the guidance that you need to draft your diet, your nutrition around that. And one thing that I really recommend as a good starting place is starting a food diary. And the food diary can be something very, very simple, where you just write down every day what you eat, so the type of food, the approximate quantity doesn't need to be measured, just the approximate quantity. And very important, the time that you consume the food throughout the day. And then also any specific sensations before and after. What do I mean by that? So a specific sensation before eating your meal could be that, you actually weren't hungry and you were just eating because the food was there, or you were starving and you almost felt a little bit shaky, or you were just really, really hungry and your stomach was rumbling. You were craving something. That's also important to note down. So any of these kind of sensations. And the same for after eating. So after eating, it could be you were still hungry. It could be you were very, very full, feeling heavy, bloated, had to lay down, maybe even take a nap. So these kind of things. And why is this helpful? Because even as someone who doesn't know too much about nutrition, you will see certain patterns. So you might look out for having long gaps between eating. You might look out for a lot of irregularity in your eating habits. Or you might see that you're always eating a lot of the same food groups, but you don't have a lot of variety in your meals. And then you would have to look back into what is important to you. So again, if it's important to you to change your shape, maybe to support your exercise routine, then you would be more concerned about the macronutrients. So looking into, okay, am I actually getting a lot of protein? Am I getting the right amount of carbohydrates? Are the carbohydrates that I'm getting very sugary, or are they actually the good carbohydrates, and so on? If you're looking into getting more energy, then you could look into the regularity of your food as well. The regularity of your eating. So are you having breakfast every day? Are you having lunch every day? Are you having dinner every day? Is there not too long gaps? Why is that important? Because remember, food basically is energy. So if you want to have your energy levels as a nice sustainable level throughout the day, you should be eating the same way and not starving your body for like 8 hours at a time and then having a heavy meal. So then your body has to actually digest all that food that just came in. And then again, you're having a big gap. So that just doesn't, support a maintained energy balance throughout the day. So that's the way you want to eat as well. So even again, if you don't have a lot of knowledge about nutrition, a food diary is definitely really, really helpful and can definitely give you a huge insight into what might be going wrong and where you might start to tweak slightly. Good. So we had a question. What was the question? Yeah. So how to make a healthy diet to lose weight, basically, was the question. And yeah, I think I answered that already. So it's looking into your lifestyle, making sure that the macronutrients are well balanced. And again, as a good starting point, I would always try 40% of carbohydrates and then 30% each of fat and of protein. And then keeping in mind that the 30% calories that we're getting from fat in actual grams will be much less than the 30% from the protein, because 1 gram of fat has 9 calories compared to the 4 calories for carbohydrates and for protein. So that's important to keep that in mind. That's a good starting point. And then spreading that out nice and even over ideally 3 meals and 1 or 2 snacks. So that's what I like to go with. I'm saying 1 or 2 snacks because it depends on your breakfast and lunch normally. So for a lot of people, they have, let's say you have breakfast at 9 and then you have lunch at 12:30. So there is no need to have a snack in between. But then if you have lunch at 12:30 and you have dinner at 7, then you would definitely need a nice big snack in there. But if your lunch is much later or your breakfast is much earlier, then you can absolutely put a snack between your breakfast and your lunch as well. So that depends a little bit on the timings that you have. So, yeah, I think I answered the question. I hope so. Please feel free to drop any other questions that you might have into the chat box, and I'll put down my details as well. So feel free to reach out if you have any more questions that I might answer for you. And thank you so much for joining in today.